Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Today we're going to continue on from last week, the second part of Steele's interview. He's going to go into his background. He's going to go into the important things people need to remember in this type of role. But most importantly, he's going to talk about the difference between the W-2 sales rep and the 1099 sales rep. That's a question I get often. Should I be W-2? Should I be 1099? If I can't find any W-2 position, should I just find a 1099 job? And will that get me what I need to get a W-2 position? Steele is going to highlight us and address it fully, to the best of his ability anyway, on what the differences are and what you should be thinking about if you're someone that's in position to make a decision about it. It's a wonderful episode. Again, we get into the details, so I really hope you enjoy this interview. Now I want to take it back to your experience. People need to know, where did you get all this experience? How long have you been in the industry?
So I've been in sales around 11 years. I've been in the medical industry for, if you include my experience in the hospital, over 12.
Okay.
So I started early in college, like I mentioned before, and was an orderly in the operating room. My dad's a surgeon. My uncles are surgeons, so I'm definitely spoiled when it comes to being a doctor's kid, when it comes to recognition in the operating room. I've worked for everything in my life from an early age, so I'm very fortunate about the ethic he instilled in me when he didn't have to. But as a doctor's kid in the operating room, you're just known. I'm like, oh, you're Dr. So-and-so's son. I'm like, yeah, that's great. Now I have to live up to another standard. But I'm very fortunate for that in my life, because it allowed me some positions and some things to do that maybe I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. But pretty early into that job as an orderly and kind of cleaning rooms and restocking items, I was afforded the ability to learn to be a first assist.
Okay.
And a first assist is just a person that helps the surgeon retracting, and what they call retracting, helping hold wounds open and holding sutures and grabbing instruments on a basic level, just helping the room and the surgery actually move forward. You're scrubbed in to the procedure. Your hands are on patient and you're helping the physician and the staff. So I did that in college way back in 2007, and learned the OR really, really quickly. I was working a lot. And I also got to see medical device reps for the first time when I started doing more orthopedics than anything else, any other specialty. So, and then towards the end of my college life, I very much learned that college was not for me, and I did not want to continue to be in higher learning any more than I needed to be. And as I tried to transition out of my college life into an actual big boy job, as I call it, I was kind of lost and didn't really know what to do. And, my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, and I kind of sat down and had some real heart-to-heart discussions about, what is it that I want to do, and what do I like doing? And, ultimately she and I both kind of fell back on this job that I had in college in the operating room, and one thing led to another. And it's like, oh, well, there's medical device sales. And that'd be a cool job. And the more research you do, just like the data you see and put out, it's a lucrative business, and it can be very, very fun and interesting. And, I don't need anything but a college degree for the most part, and a willingness to move anywhere in the country. And at this time, it's 2009. We're in the middle of the worst economic downturn that we've had in a very long time. The statistics on my graduating class, 8% were employed and 3% were employed in their field of study. So it was rough getting a job coming out that wasn't wasn't something that you really didn't want to do at all.
Right.
So, I was fortunate to meet some people in college, to get some interviews at some medical supply companies, and some of the bigger ones that are big chains across the world. And I tried interviewing some of those places, and none of them panned out. And eventually I found this medical device job in Houston, Texas, and drove out there in my little beat up car and did an interview for a low-level entry orthopedic rep job. He liked the interview, said, "Hey, why don't you come back in a week?" And I was like, "Oh man, I gotta drive back out here again in 7 days." And at this point, I graduated, but was working as a veterinary tech in my hometown, and so I found a way to get back out there. And I convinced him that he needed to give me the job, and it was the best break that I've gotten, short of marrying my wife. So,
awesome.
It was an orthopedic job in Houston, Texas, and that's another piece of advice I'll give somebody who's in this industry or wants to be in this industry is, if you're not willing to relocate for your first job, you might be getting a lot of no's just for that simple reason. Yeah. And I get it. I like where I live, which is my hometown essentially. And my family is here and my kids have their cousins and aunts and uncles. I get that. But if you're not at least willing to show that you're willing to do what you need to for your career, people might look at that and read between the lines. So once I got the job, I jumped at it. Of course, I didn't have kids. I wasn't completely married at the time. We were engaged, but I got in the car, packed my stuff up and left, and completely devoted myself to learning every single thing I could for as long as I could, so I can get a full territory. And I was extremely fortunate. Houston, Texas is the medical capital of the world. In most respects, it has the largest per capita medical community in the world for sure. There's about 400 plus facilities, medical facilities, hospitals, surgery centers in the Houston metro area. Houston's like 4.5 million people, population size. That's bigger than the state of Alabama. Yeah. And so it's a lot of people, but it also affords you the opportunity to learn in the best environment that you probably could as a new rep. So, I remember 3 days into my job, not knowing where I was or what I was doing, and my boss going, "Okay, man, take these things here and we'll see you later." And it was a sink or swim moment. And I was sinking for a long time, and until I learned to at least float with my big old belly, and then eventually learned to swim. So I did that for a little while. And
that was with which company?
So I was with Acumed, or a distributor of Acumed. They're an orthopedic trauma company, kind of a niche company.
So your first position was a 1099 role? Yes.
Right. And as a matter of fact, I was 1099 up until July of 2019. So I spent the majority of my career as a 1099.
Can you break it down a little bit for our audience, for those that might not know what the difference is between a 1099 and a W-2 rep?
No benefits versus benefits. No, it's much more intricate than that. So, depending on where you are in the country and what state you're in, it can mean a lot of things. But 1099, you're not an employee of the company. And there's certain things that those people who hire you don't have to provide, like taxes or benefits or anything like that. You are a contract worker. Now, there's a lot of things that come with that are good and or bad. But you are a contracted worker to sell a certain thing for somebody who owns the right to a certain area. So my boss had the rights to sell Acumed trauma products to Houston and the South Texas market. And I was hired as one of his contract workers to sell those items.
Got it.
And, some of the 1099 W-2, and we can get into this, it's something that people need to think about and need to understand. The 1099 model, which usually infers that there is a distributor of some form, who is your boss, who has multiple people like you and your level, and maybe some managers above you. It's a much more common thing than W-2. W-2 employees are usually base salary plus commission employees. They have benefits of some sort, usually health benefits, usually some type of, fun stuff like a company car or a company credit card. The health benefits is the big thing. You're getting your retirement normally paid for in some form or fashion, and your health benefits paid for in some form or fashion, and absolutely your taxes, or at least they're half of it. Now, as a 1099 rep, and of course I didn't learn any of this the easy way. I got a job offer and I said, yes, please, I'll be here tomorrow. Don't give it to somebody else who's prettier than me. You have to pay all of your taxes as a 1099 representative. You rarely will have medical benefits. You will rarely have expenses paid for. It's all very determinative. So in my position, when I started out early on, I had small benefits paid for. When it came to some of my gas was paid for. And I think I vaguely had some health benefits, but it was not full health insurance. But when it comes to taxes, you have to be prepared to take out whatever you determine is the right percentage. I always took out 30%. That's the highest tax bracket that I probably would ever be in my entire career.
Sure.
And I knew if I took out 30% of my income right away and never touched it, that when the IRS came knocking, I had it.
You'd be fine.
And I could pay it.
Yeah.
So you have to do some education. You have to do your homework and read into specifically what your employer, and that's a funny word that you use, employer, because you're not an employee.
Right.
At least you're not supposed to be. What they're providing, and more importantly, what they're not providing. You need to learn to do taxes and to find your own private health insurance and what that means for you. And depending on where you are in your life and whatever phase you're in, it can mean yes or no to a job. Absolutely.
So you were 1099 rep for a while. And when you describe it, it's almost, the question becomes, why was he a 1099 rep for so long?
It's really simple. And, this happened in my interview process. And, I tell the story all the time. Like I said, at one point in our conversation, my dad was a surgeon, but I was raised with my mom and my stepdad. And my stepdad was a lawyer before he passed. And so I was extremely fortunate in life. And I thank God for that every day. And I didn't want for very much, but I was also instilled very, very early that I had to work for anything that I wanted. Sure. And I had a job from the age of 12 on, but it came up in the interview process, and I had my boss look at me and say, why should I hire you and expect you to do anything and to work hard? And, I politely stood up and walked to the window that was in his office, and I pointed to the parking garage down below, and you could see my 1992 Camry that was still smoking from how I'd driven it, 600 miles. I said, that's why. But in that conversation, we talked about, he was clear. He's like, you understand this is a 1099 position. I said, okay. And he kind of explained it a little bit. I said, so you're telling me I can make as much money as I want to, as long as I work hard. He's like, well, yeah. I was like, sign me up. Again, in my phase of life, I didn't have my wife yet.
Right.
She didn't move out there with me. I didn't have children. I didn't have friends where I was in Houston, Texas, and I had work.
You were minimal risk with all the ability in the world. I mean, why not? Right. I know.
Me and 400 square foot apartment. That's it. I mean, I didn't need anything but frozen pizzas for, a year and a half. But, so for me, it was a phenomenal way for me to cut my teeth. It proves my work ethic and what I told these people I had. It showed them ultimately, because, about 7 months into my job, I got promoted to a territory rep, to a full territory rep, that I was willing to work as hard as I could to make as much money as I could.
Yeah.
Now, things have changed in the 10 to 15 years since I did that. And, the standard of living, quote unquote, and the demands that people are putting on employers has changed a lot from then to now. Okay. But, I was told I could make as much money as I wanted to, and I was told I was getting a job.
Right.
So, and like I said earlier, the norm is 1099. The norm is 1099 in orthopedic device. And more so than not. At least a distributor type role is more common than not. Now, depending on where you are in the country, some states are pushing that you have to have W-2 and not 1099 for a lot of various reasons, but it is harder to find a job as a W-2 in orthopedics. That is not
go finish that. That is not what?
That's not like total joints or something that's a little bit harder to get as an entry level job. Some of the non-entry level jobs, as you continue to build experience, then you can absolutely find those. And there are some companies like Johnson & Johnson, Smith & Nephew are two big ones that you can get a W-2 job. It's scaled down version. So you're getting some benefits, some salary, but your expectations are different. Your ceilings are much lower. So you have to do a pros and cons list and accept what you want to accept and then go for it.
So it sounds like you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steele, that 1099, you can make more and you have more options as far as career options. You have more career options than starting out that way as opposed to starting out with a W-2 position.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, your ceiling as a 1099 is usually higher because you're not getting benefits that somebody else is getting.
Right.
And you're also going to see more opportunities at 1099 because it is a cheaper model for a corporation to have than it is for them to bring on employees. You know, if they're not paying for somebody's healthcare and retirement and salary and car and all this stuff, then some people say, well, why would I? I can contract people out and it's easy to hire, easy to fire, and cheaper. Sure. Now you usually have to make up for it and tell the contract employer, hey, we'll give you a higher percentage and we will make sure you have what we call uncapped commission.
Got it.
And a W-2 employer can go, no, I'm going to cap your commission because I'm giving you benefits and, you know, I'm giving you $50,000 of unseen income that allows you to do what you need to do. So it's absolutely easier to find 1099 jobs. And in theory, you can make more money. Now, you absolutely will see W-2 people making more money than 1099, but that usually means that 1099 rep is just not as good as the W-2 rep. So.
Got it.
And it's industry specific. You know, you don't really see this in the vascular space that I'm in now. It's all big corporations and big companies and just their divisions. So it's a lot different. But in the orthopedic space, which is the main driver in medical device, in my opinion, it's really, really common.
Gotcha. I want to shift gears here a little bit and talk about leadership.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about your leadership experience.
So, you know, I've always tried to, you know, personally be in that type of role. I enjoy having the chance to lead somebody and to change somebody's trajectory in their life. And, you know, whether it's on the sports field or arena, or, you know, in the military or even in the jobs I'm in now. But, you know, pretty early into my career, at some point, I had interactions with people that I had to be responsible for. But not until about the midpoint of my career did I have a true team, people that, for the most part, I had correct. And that reported to me, and I had direction on whether they were there or not and what they did. And it was an eye-opening experience. Those first couple of years where I was a territory manager and a true team lead territory manager, it was interesting, especially when I went through my first hiring, firing processes that I at least had a say in. You know, again, I was working for a distributor who had the ultimate say, but, you know, he would defer to me because that was my territory. And ultimately that person was working with me and it was my opinion that mattered most. But, you know, it opened my eyes into leadership roles and how difficult they really, really are, especially nowadays. And, you know, people are very, very different, and sales allows for people to win in different ways. And you have to acknowledge that. And there's no one cover-all, one sales strategy that's going to cover every single individual.
Gotcha.
You know, and my wife has been good about enlightening me on personality traits of different people. And, how they think. And, you come and you'll do these aptitude tests and these personality tests that are really common in hiring processes nowadays. And it allows you to see how people work, but more importantly, it allows you to see how you're supposed to lead them and how to manage them. And I had some bad experiences with younger generations early on, and I would try to impose my will, and this is how I did it. I'm a part of the OG group, and we, you don't even know how we had it back in our day, in our pagers and, pay phones, but I'm not that much older than them, but that's how quickly the industry accelerates forward. But I've learned really quickly, you can't take that approach, and you have to take every single individual as they are and see how you can lead that person successfully. And ultimately it's how you mold a team of individuals around you that will determine whether you're super successful or just pretty average. You got to have somebody that picks up in the places where you let down. And if there's anybody that thinks they have it all and they can do everything in every single facet, then they're lying to you, and they're not being humble about it. And, they're not going to survive very long. You have to accept that you have weaknesses in certain areas and certain things. And, one big example is I'm not an overly pushy rep, or what you would call a pushy rep. I'm not super aggressive.
Sure.
I'm much more of a builder. I've learned to be much more of a challenger in my days. And there's a phenomenal selling series in a book called The Challenger Sale that I make everybody read.
Yeah,
and
that's kind of is a great series.
It looks like it's behind you right there. I can't really tell. But, and I've learned, it blew my mind that as a relationship builder, which is what I would absolutely peg myself as, I was not going to be the most successful rep. And it blew my sales career wide open. But I learned really quickly that there's some scenarios where you need the pushy guy to get across the line, because that's that position's need, and that's how they respond. And so as a leader, I've learned usually in bad ways that I need to be much more patient and diligent about understanding the individual and how they fit into the team as a whole versus what I think everybody should do, and imposing the will like a dictator. It's just not gonna be survivable, in my opinion, long term, if you don't do it. That
makes perfect sense. So you've covered Acumed, and you covered your 1099 life with Arthrex, and now Cordis, which is your W-2 lifestyle.
The high life, baby.
The high life. So, and say as much as you're free to say, what do you see for your future, Steele? Where do you intend to take things, or where would you like to take them?
Oh man, it's an amazing question. Cordis is a phenomenal company, and I'm super blessed to have this opportunity. The cardiovascular space is something I've wanted to get into for a long time, and it's ultra competitive in a very different way from the orthopedic space. The majority of people in the sales side of this industry, or the clinical side of it, came out of a lab, out of a cath lab, or have cardiovascular experience in some form or fashion. I'm the oddball out, although I'm much more common nowadays than in days past, where people are using sales success to fill roles versus, cardiovascular experience in the past. Sure. But, the ability that Cordis has afforded me and my family, it's unmeasurable. And it was a decision that I had to make, and for myself. And again, I love orthopedics. That's something that will always have a place in my heart, because I did it for so long, and I have lifelong friendships and relationships with physicians and staff and nurses and people. But the cardiovascular space has challenged me in such a different way, and it's refreshing to be a part of it. So, if you look at it from a business standpoint, I'm a W-2 employee now, so it's great. I have health insurance that's provided for me essentially. And, I have other accessories that are nice. I have a company car, and, have some of those benefits there, and I'm salary plus commission. So, I'm taking home something for my family and my children, regardless, which, during COVID times is nice to know. And I have great friends that are 1099 orthopedic reps who are taking out loans and trying to make ends meet because, their bosses are getting hit with lack of business. And it's just, that's the industry that it is, and this industry is pretty recession proof as a whole. People don't stop getting sick. They don't stop having heart attacks or breaking bones. Now they might not use your stuff to fix it. And that's where you could be in or out of a job. But, Cordis has been phenomenal for me in my career. My pace of life has changed dramatically. My industry and my specific discipline is not as high strung generally when it comes to my job. Now, obviously when you're talking about heart attacks, and trying to save limbs from being amputated, it's all high stress. And you're dealing with the vascular system that you can't really see until stuff goes wrong. And, it's high strung, but when it comes to my day to day, I'm much less attached to my pager and my cell phone than I've ever been. And the point in my career where I was getting burnt out, and it's a very common thing you see, usually a lot earlier in their career than when I made, I was 10 plus years in and made the switch. But in my opinion, I didn't have the resume to feel valuable to a vascular company until then. And once I felt like I could be an asset, then I went for it. So Cordis has been a godsend in every way. I have managers and a company as a whole that care about us individually. The stories that I could tell about Cardinal Health and Cordis and the small family we have, we would be here for days. But it's a great company that cares about their patients, cares about their employees, and not to say that my previous ones didn't, but it has allowed me for my phase of life to be happier and more content with where I am. So and still do what I love, which is helping patients and helping doctors treat their patients and have good outcomes. So.
That's excellent. On that note, I wanted to ask you, what happens when you're doing your job? What typically happens when you get to say to yourself, like, that's awesome. I feel so good about what I'm doing. Is it something you've heard from a surgeon? Is it something you've heard from a colleague? Do you ever get to hear what patients say? I mean, what normally happens when you have that self-talk of you're just so proud of what you're doing?
I wish I could tell people that it was a patient response. Patient interaction is very, very little, right. as it should be. In the spinal cord stimulator space, you get a little bit more interaction with patients because you're actually talking to people. But hey, they're
developing actual relationships with the patient forever, right? Yeah,
you're adjusting leads and things on patients so they don't feel pain. Or you're actually talking to them and touching to them. And there's certain aspects of medical sales, like bracing and stuff like that, where you interact with patients. But on the medical device side, it is rare that you have patient interactions. Sometimes you see it in recovery, depending on your products that you're doing. And sometimes you see them, in clinics when they come back for follow-up. But in my career, when it's not reaffirmation from my numbers, which is tough sometimes to sit there and watch your number day to day. And that's, as an ultra competitive person, I warn people against doing that. I do it now, but it can eat at you, especially when you're having a down year, or a super up year, and then your year changes and your quota doubles. It can be dangerous. You need to look big picture ultimately. So, but if it's not reaffirmation with hitting my quota or hitting a target, it's absolutely been the surgeons in my career. And it's always been in a setting where I have challenged the surgeon on what they're doing in the middle of a procedure, and they look at you and go, "That's a good point. Thanks for telling me." And then at the end of the case, they pat you on the back, say, thank you for being here. That was a good move or good call, or I appreciate it. And like I said before, my ultimate goal is to be able to look a surgeon in the eyes, have a conversation with him or her about what they're doing and why they're doing it. Mm-hmm. And know that they can view my response, my opinion, as well as they would a colleague. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I'm just a guy from Alabama that has a zoology degree. Why should they care about my medical opinion? And I mean, I have experience, and that's where you build yourself up is, I have years of experience. I know what I'm talking about. If you do the right things and you do your homework, you read every day, you put your face in a journal, you know your competitors better than they know you. I mean, if you do all of these things day in and day out, it will happen. The surgeon will look at you and view you as an asset. And you also know pretty easily if you aren't wanted and if they don't want you around, they don't respond to you. They don't talk to you. They don't ask you. Right. I have surgeons that call me and ask me my opinion about things. That's and awesome. It's humbling to know that these smart individuals are asking me my opinion on something because they value it. So I try not to, and I'm learning to trying to not get so much validation out of my career and try to focus on things that really matter, like my family and my faith and other things like that. But, my career has been so all consuming in my life that it is nice to have those moments where a surgeon says, I appreciate that. It really was needed. And thank you for that. So
that is excellent. I love it. Well, Steele, we're going to wrap this up. Please give us any last words to the audience that you feel everybody needs to hear.
Set yourself apart in some way. Don't be average in any way, and bring a notebook to the room where you go. Always have a notebook in your back pocket. I learned this from people that I look up to in my life, and it says a lot about who you are as a rep and potential rep if you're not willing to learn and you don't want to better yourself and be there for the patient. So carry a notebook, have a notebook in your back pocket, little book that you can write your notes in and what you're learning every single day. I don't care if you're 1 year in, 20 years in, it doesn't matter. You're always learning. It never stops. And then, Samuel, I know this, if you're not thinking about the patient first, you don't need to be doing this job. I don't care how much money you're making. If you're a millionaire and life is great for you, if you're not thinking about the patient, then this isn't the industry for you. This is our way of extending out and affecting patients' lives without being physicians ourselves. And this is how we do it. This is our little special way behind the table affecting patients. So keep the patient first, carry a notebook, and, try hard and see what happens.
Love it. Steele, it was awesome having you as a guest today. Thanks again. And, look forward to hearing more of what you do within your future.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Definitely. Talk to you soon.
Take care, man.
Fantastic. We got the full understanding. We know where 1099 fits. We know where W-2 fits. I mean, he spent a long time in the 1099 space. And I loved how he said, from his experience, that role gave him a lot of grit. It gave him a lot of that bare bones attitude that I think anyone that wants to enter a medical device space needs to be familiar with or really get familiar with. So they're up to the task if they step into that kind of role. And Steele did a great job of painting the picture of what life actually looks like. And what I love towards the end of that interview is that he talks about how it really does need to be all about the patient. At the end of the day, that is the focus. Your entire career is literally molded by how you can better improve this person who is the patient. And everything you can do from your role with the surgeon, with the staff, with your understanding, and with your devices, how can you best serve the patient? And I think that's so critical, that's so important, and that should be top of mind with anyone going for a position, top of mind with anyone that's in the field trying to make it work, and top of mind with the leaders as well, just to remind their teams what everyone's doing everything for. It was an excellent episode. So nice to spend time with Steele. So if you're someone that wants to do what Steele is doing, you want to be in the OR, you want to help a surgeon be more efficient and provide that much more value to the patient and ensuring the procedure goes well, then you need to visit evolvesuccess.com and you need to take our assessment. It's an assessment that's going to give you exactly where you are. So it's going to rank you on what you're doing right and what you're not doing right that can get you into a medical sales position. And I want to clear the air real quick about this medical sales position stuff. There are a few things that people assume will get you that kind of career and that will automatically disqualify you. I want to say that it's much more than people realize. It's not as restrictive as you might think. But some of the things that can definitely increase your chances are, if you're someone with a degree, it's going to help for the mere fact that there are so many people with degrees applying for these positions. And by you not having one, it puts you at a disadvantage. Does it mean you're not as good? No. Does it mean you're not as smart? No. Does it mean you might even be a better representative than the other people? Sure. But the reality of going against that number of people that all have degrees and you not having one, it's something you need to understand and not count yourself out, but say, okay, what can I do to get in front of that so that I can be seen at par with everyone interviewing? Do you have to have sales experience? Of course, sales experience will help, right? Because the job is sales. And even though you're going to understand all this technical stuff, all this anatomy stuff, and definitely know how to develop and cultivate and really nourish relationships, you do have to know how to sell. The beautiful thing about selling is it can be taught, it can be practiced, and it can be performed well. So more so than you having this stellar sales background to get these positions, you got to be able to make the case that you can actually do it. And then one more thing that I want to clear the air with when it comes to getting these positions. If you have any background, bring it to the table. Because it's not about the background you currently have. It's about how are you going to utilize the background you currently have, develop the skills you absolutely need, and communicate a story that makes sense to someone that wants to consider you based on everything you experienced. That's what's going to do it. And that's what we help you focus on. And that's what we, for lack of a better word, put together and then send you off into the races so you can go and be number one and get your position. If you're someone that wants to increase your sales performance, again, you got to visit evolvesuccess.com and select Improve Sales Performance. We have a very tailored plan, very, very tailored to the individual, where we specifically focus on what you need help with for either 3 or 6 months. We're soon enrolling a year-long program, but for 3 or 6 months, we track your behaviors, we identify what behaviors need to be, and we get you to an ultimate goal. And we decide what that looks like, exactly what that looks like before we get started. It's very specific and it's very tailored, and it works. So again, thank you all for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast. We always do our best to bring you guests that will give you insight into the industry, into the nuances of the industry, the different fields within the industry, how to survive in the industry, how to thrive in the industry, how to lead in the industry, and how to even get out of the industry into something even bigger and better and could be providing even more value. We want you all to learn it here. And that's why we do what we do. And we want you all to see us as your resource to improving whatever it is you want to improve within the medical sales space. And when I say medical sales space, I'm talking about the all-encompassing healthcare manufacturers, pharmaceutical manufacturers, medical device manufacturers, genetic testing manufacturers, you name it. If you're anywhere in that space, if you have anything to do with something in that space, and you know you need something, we are the resource. We are a great resource, whether it be people that you need, whether it be services that you need, training that you need, development that you need, strategy that you need. This is where you come to. Thank you again for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast, and make sure you tune in next week for another amazing episode. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.